Sometimes the scars you can't see hurt the most. But for me, they were visible, raw, and unavoidable. I didn't get breast implants because I wanted attention. I got them because I wanted to survive. But when my coworker decided to mock me and spread gossip to the entire office, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply said, understood. And then, I did what she never saw coming. I pulled my own reverse Uno. I was just 24 when I lost my mother to breast cancer. That sentence alone holds a weight most people my age weren't ready to carry. But for me, it was more than a loss, it was a warning. My mom had been the third woman in our family to lose her life to this disease. Her mother, my grandmother, gone. My dad's mom? Same fate. I was standing at the end of a line of women who all carried a deadly inheritance, one that didn't skip generations. After my mom passed, I was emotionally shattered, but I also knew I needed to be practical. So I booked myself in for a full genetic screening and breast cancer checkup. I tried to tell myself it was just a precaution, that the odds were slim, that maybe I could breathe easy once the results came back. But I didn't get to breathe easy. The specialist looked me in the eyes and told me I had precancerous cells in one breast, cells that had a high probability of turning into full-blown cancer in the near future. It wasn't cancer yet, but it was close. And it was dangerous. Then came the impossible decision. Asterisk option 1. Get checked every 3 to 4 months and hope for the best, living in constant anxiety. Asterisk option 2. Remove one breast and keep screening the other. Asterisk option 3. A full bilateral mastectomy. Remove both, end the risk. It sounds simple now. But it wasn't. I cried. I panicked. I screamed at the ceiling asking why I had to choose between fear and losing a part of myself. But in the end, the memories of my mother's chemo, her pain, her quiet moments of despair, those memories made my choice for me. I had both breasts removed. I chose survival. You know what they don't tell you about mastectomies? It's not just about losing your breasts. It's about losing how you see yourself in the mirror. I was warned about scarring. They said it might be minimal. Neat. It wasn't. When the bandages finally came off, I stared at my chest and felt sick. Two thick, jagged, raised pink scars cut across my chest like claw marks. They weren't subtle. They weren't fading. They were loud. Angry. Ugly. At least, that's how I saw them. For months, I couldn't stand to see myself. I avoided mirrors. I stopped going outside. I became a ghost in my own life. My confidence wasn't just shattered, it was obliterated. Eventually, I sought therapy. And I'm glad I did. My therapist helped me begin to piece myself back together, but they could see I was still struggling every time I looked at myself. They suggested I see a plastic surgeon, not because I was vain, but because it was part of my healing. The surgeon offered 3 options: scar cream, laser treatment, or implants. I tried the cream, no difference. The laser? Too risky. Too expensive. So I chose implants. And before anyone asks, no, I didn't go bigger. My original cup size was an F. I actually went down to a DD. And for the first time in years, I felt normal again. The scars were hidden. My shape returned. My confidence slowly crept back. I could wear clothes again without flinching. I could walk into rooms without feeling like everyone could see my trauma written across my chest. I could live. Flash forward 4 years. I'm 28 now, doing much better. I landed a job at a pretty solid company. Admin work, decent benefits, great coworkers. At least, most of them. One coworker in particular, we'll call her Jill, was the kind of woman who always had something to say. The self-appointed queen of water cooler gossip. If drama was oxygen, she'd never suffocate. Now, I never told anyone at work about my surgery. It wasn't their business. I was doing my job, minding my own, and I wanted to be judged for my performance, not my body. One day during lunch, my best friend, someone who knew me before the mastectomy, joked about me going on a plane with my implants. You know, the whole, do they explode in air pressure? Joke. Silly, harmless, private, or so we thought. Jill was sitting 2 tables away. Apparently, she'd been eavesdropping. And by the end of that day, half the office knew I'd gotten a boob job. I didn't hear it directly from Jill, but 5 different coworkers mentioned her name, confirming she'd spread the gossip. And just like that, my medical trauma had become a punchline in the office cafeteria. The days that followed were awful. I could feel people staring. Whispers followed me down hallways. Even those who meant no harm had a certain look in their eyes. Curiosity? Pity? Judgment? I don't know. But Jill? She wasn't subtle. She'd smirk when I walked past. I once caught her making exaggerated chest gestures while talking to another woman in accounting. It all came to a boiling point one Friday. I confronted her quietly in the break room. No yelling. Just calmly asked her to stop talking about my body to others. Her reaction? She laughed. Then loudly announced in front of 2 coworkers. If you didn't want people to notice your fake T *****s, maybe you shouldn't have gotten them so big. I felt rage. Humiliation. But I bit my tongue and walked out. Later that day, I filed an informal complaint with HR. I didn't want to start a war, I just wanted peace. But peace was not what I got. The next Monday, I got an email from HR. Apparently, Jill had filed a complaint against me. She said I'd verbally harassed her in the break room, made her feel unsafe, and had aggressively confronted her about her personal opinions. I was shocked, furious, but mostly I felt cornered. But here's the thing. I'd kept receipts. After that first incident, I'd started logging every inappropriate comment she made. I even asked a couple of coworkers, those who weren't Jill's little flying monkeys, if they'd be willing to write a short statement if needed. I wasn't planning anything at the time, but my gut told me I might need backup someday. That day had come. I walked into HR, handed them a folder. Inside were written statements from 7 coworkers, all detailing different moments when Jill had mocked, harassed, or gossiped about me in front of others. Some mentioned her inappropriate jokes. Others recalled the exact comments she'd made in meetings, even making mock gestures behind my back. The HR manager read them all. Their expression changed from polite neutrality to concerned focus. Then I dropped the final bomb. I told them the reason I'd gotten implants. That I'd had a double mastectomy after discovering I had a high risk of developing breast cancer. That my mother and both grandmothers had died of it. That the implants weren't cosmetic, they were survival. The room went quiet. By the end of the week, Jill was gone. No dramatic office showdown. No screaming match. Just an empty desk, and an HR email stating that a team member had been terminated for violating workplace policies. Word spread fast. And for once, it wasn't about me. Some coworkers apologized for not stepping in sooner. Others thanked me quietly for standing up, because apparently, Jill had made life miserable for more than just me. I kept my head down, did my job, and walked a little taller. Not because I got someone fired, but because I protected myself. I stood up when it would have been easier to fold. At the log, healing isn't always quiet. People think revenge means yelling, breaking things, or public shaming. You know all about being shallow. Jill smirked, eyes locked on my chest like she hadn't just reduced a survivor to a punchline. That's when something in me cracked. I'd put up with Jill's jabs for months. Subtle insults, snide jokes, always just loud enough that I could hear them, but quiet enough that she could pretend it was nothing. It wasn't every day, but 3 times a week for 3 months? That's not banter. That's harassment. She called me plastic. Said I had more plastic than Barbie. And once, I was told she referred to me as a sack of silicone. Behind my back. I didn't even hear that one myself. It came from a friend in the office who was brave enough to tell me. What made it worse? One time she sneered something about the NHS. From what I gathered, she thought I'd gotten my implants for free on taxpayer money. Newsflash, the mastectomy was NHS. But the therapy and the implants? I paid for those out of pocket. But even if they were free, why would that matter? Is surviving cancer now some kind of punchline? I'd asked her to stop. More than once. But always in places where no one else was around. The lift, the bathroom. Places without cameras. And every time I said, "Please stop," she'd roll her eyes or chuckle and walk away. It was exhausting. The final straw came at lunch. A group of us were eating, just making small talk, when I referred to something as being shallow. That's when Jill pounced. With a smug little laugh and a flick of her wrist toward my chest, she said, "You know all about being shallow." My ears rang. Time slowed. I was done. I put down my fork, took a deep breath, and said loud and clear, "Do you know why I have these? A few years ago, the doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a mastectomy, and I was left with huge, ugly scars. I saw a therapist who sent me to a surgeon, and I got implants, not to be sexy, not to show off, but because I wanted to be able to look in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for cosmetic surgery, you should ask why they had it first." Then I picked up my food and walked out. No screaming. No theatrics. Just the truth. And you could hear a pin drop behind me. That afternoon, something strange happened. About a third of my coworkers quietly came up to me. Some in the hallway. Some at my desk. Some on Slack. They offered support. Said they were proud of me. That it needed to be said. But the other two-thirds? They weren't so kind. Some told me Jill was just joking. Others said I was being too sensitive. One even called me a bitch. I looked her right in the eyes and said, Jill was being a bitch long before I was. I thought that would be the end of it. But then I got an email from HR. The subject line was simple: meeting requests regarding workplace conduct. Inside was a request to meet the next day. The reason? A complaint had been filed. They mentioned something about a hostile work environment. Now, I'm in England. That phrase, hostile work environment, isn't typically used here. But the person who signed off on the email? Debbie, Jill's close friend in HR. The moment I saw her name, I knew exactly what was happening. Jill had twisted the narrative again. She was using her friendship with HR to try to take me down. Again. But this time, I was ready. That night I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I prepared. I remembered a line in my contract from when I first got hired, something about the complaint process. I dug it out, flipped through the pages, and there it was. In the event of an internal complaint, the employee has the right to request an impartial overseer if there is reasonable belief that the assigned HR reviewer is biased. I photocopied the page, highlighted the clause. Then I got to work gathering evidence. First, I messaged the coworkers who had offered their support that afternoon. I kept it simple. HR has asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me directly or in front of you? If so, would you be willing to write and sign something saying what you heard and when? Not everyone responded. Jill had a reputation. People feared her, and feared her connections to management even more. But still, about 20 people said yes. 20. That's not support. That's an army. One by one, statements came in. Dated. Detailed. Names, locations, times, quotes. Everything from the plastic Barbie jokes to the eye rolls to the constant whispering behind my back. Some even mentioned that Jill had spread rumors about other women in the office, mocking their weight, their fashion, even their relationships. Turns out, she had more enemies than friends. And I had more allies than I thought. The next day, I walked into the HR meeting with a full dossier. But before I sat down, I handed Debbie a copy of my contract, highlighted, and said, I'm invoking my right to request an impartial overseer. I believe there is a conflict of interest here. Her face changed. A pause. Then a nod. Okay, she said tight-lipped. I'll escalate this. Within 2 days, I was reassigned to another HR rep. Neutral. Unfamiliar. We met the following Monday. I brought in every written statement. Every printed message. The contract clause. And I told them everything, from the mastectomy, to the harassment, to the way Jill weaponized gossip like it was a game. The new rep listened. Took notes. Asked for copies. At the end, they thanked me for being professional. And promised to investigate thoroughly. Over the next week, whispers swirled again, but not about me. About Jill. She was being called into meetings. Her tone was different. Her smile faded. Her smirk turned nervous. Then, on Friday, she was gone. Just like that. One HR email later, her desk was cleared. Jill has left the company. It read. We wish her the best. There was no farewell lunch. No goodbye speech. Just an empty chair. And finally, peace. Epilogue: strength isn't always loud. Soft music builds, then fades. I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. I didn't want war. I wanted peace. But sometimes, standing up for yourself is a war. One that requires strategy, patience, and unwavering self-respect. Jill thought she could control the narrative because she had a friend in HR. But I had the truth. And 20 voices who stood with me. And in the end, that's what mattered. The night before my meeting with HR, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, but because I was busy. I had a plan, and it was time to execute. First, I sat down and tried to remember every time I'd asked Jill to stop. I'd asked her 4 separate times over the last 3 months. Some of those moments were easier to recall. One happened on my break, another when I had just clocked in for my shift. I wrote them all down with approximate dates and times. Then I made a list of everyone who'd been present during the lunchroom confrontation. It was a long shot, but if anyone was willing to go on the record, it would help. The next morning, I arrived early. I had one goal: gather the receipts. One by one, I approached the coworkers who had messaged me the day before offering support. I explained what was happening and asked if they'd be willing to write something, anything, on paper, signed with their name. And surprisingly, they delivered. I ended up with 16 signed statements. Some were short, just a paragraph. Others were more thorough, with bullet point lists of the things Jill had said. Most of them followed the same pattern. My name is name. I work with Jill, last name, and OP. On date, at approximately time, I had a conversation with Jill in which she referred to OP as insult. I believe this was inappropriate and personal, and I am willing to go on record that Jill has discussed OP's appearance repeatedly over the past 3 months, creating a hostile work environment. Signed name. One coworker included a list of insults Jill had said about other employees. One statement described her mocking someone's weight. Another said she made an anti-Semitic comment about a colleague's nose. It turned out I wasn't the only one she targeted. And while 16 people out of 45 employees might not sound like a majority, it was enough to show this wasn't just one isolated incident. Jill had a pattern, and I had proof. Question: if Jill was bothering you, why didn't you come to us earlier? I didn't have a problem with her. She had a problem with me. Question: what kind of problem? 4 years ago, I had breast tissue removed after doctors discovered precancerous cells. I was left with disfiguring scars. I saw a therapist who referred me to a plastic surgeon. The implants were to help with my self-esteem and mental health, not for vanity. Jill found out about the implants but not the reason behind them. Since then, she's made my life hell at work. Question: why do you feel this is harassment? I have 16 signed statements from different coworkers, all testifying that Jill has made inappropriate comments about me, shared personal information I didn't consent to, and repeatedly insulted my appearance. I handed them the folder. Inside were all the letters. Quotes, times, dates, even if rough. Some coworkers had included exact wording. Others had lists of repeated insults Jill made toward multiple people, proving a pattern of behavior. The room went quiet for a long time as they read. Debbie's face? Stone cold. Tense. Murderous. She had clearly expected this meeting to end with me walking out in shame, or worse, escorted out by security. Instead, the evidence piled up against her friend. And I stayed calm, collected, professional. When they were done, the supervisor said, "Thank you for preparing all of this. We'll be following up shortly." I nodded. "I appreciate your time, and your fairness." Then I left the room, quietly, confidently, and with my head held high. Over the next few days, things were tense. People whispered, but no one said anything to me directly. A week later, Jill was suspended pending investigation. By the end of the following week, her desk was cleared. Gone. There was no formal announcement. Just another vague HR email. Effective immediately, Jill, last name, will no longer be with the company. But I knew what happened. Everyone knew what happened. Jill had tried to weaponize HR. Instead, she lost her job and her reputation. Epilogue, know your worth. Document everything. Voiceover, slow fade-out music. Some people think revenge is about getting even. But for me, it was about getting my peace back. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I documented. I prepared. I followed the rules better than Jill ever did. And in the end, that's what protected me. Not favoritism. Not gossip. Receipts. Facts. Truth. I'm still at the company today. Respected. Valued. Heard. And Jill? Well, let's just say the only thing fake now is her LinkedIn job title. Excellent. Here's part 4 transformed into the final, emotionally charged segment of the full YouTube script, flowing directly from the previous acts, styled for maximum tension, satisfaction, and narrative closure. They kept asking questions, more precise this time. Sharper. Like they were closing in on the truth and just needed me to spell it out. Q. What do you believe directly led to this complaint of harassment? I was calm. Composed. The harassment, in my view, began the day Jill told the entire office I had breast implants, without my consent or context. But the complaint against me? That likely came from what happened yesterday around 12:45 p.m. in the lunchroom. Jill made a public jab about me being shallow while gesturing toward my chest. I responded by sharing an abridged version of my medical history and ended with a reminder about the importance of asking questions before judging someone. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so the footage will speak for itself. I handed them a list of names, everyone who was sitting at that table. 6 people total. One of them had even written and signed a letter detailing the entire conversation. Question: had you confronted Jill before this? Yes. 4 times over the past 3 months. Each time I told her calmly and directly that her comments made me uncomfortable, and I asked her to stop. Question: was Jill ever made aware of your cancer diagnosis during this time? No. She overheard a joke about implants from my friend, but cancer never came up. And honestly, I didn't tell her because I shouldn't have to. I don't owe anyone my medical history just to avoid harassment. There was a pause. Then the supervisor stood up, extended a hand, and said, "Well, I think we're done here. We'll review the letters, CCTV, your history, and everything else we've received and get back to you with a decision." I thanked them, shook his hand, and walked back to my desk. But inside, I was preparing for the worst. I opened my laptop, pulled up my CV, started reviewing job boards. Because even when you do everything right, document, stay professional, speak up, you still worry. You still wonder if the system will protect the wrong person again. The rest of the office was quiet. Normal. Until the interviews began. Around an hour after I returned to my desk, I noticed movement. The first person called in was Sarah, the one who had written a letter and witnessed the lunchroom conversation. She came back 10 minutes later, her face unreadable. Then, one by one, the others were summoned. Cassie, who heard the Barbie comment. James, who reported the sack of silicone insult. Priya, who overheard Jill mocking someone's weight. Andrew, who detailed several conversations. Each person spent about 10 minutes with HR. Some longer, some shorter. By 3:30 p.m., it was clear. They were interviewing every single person who had written a letter or been present in the lunchroom. But Jill hadn't been called yet. Not until. At around 3:45 p.m., Jill's name was finally called. She got up slowly, gathering her things like she was heading to war. She was gone for 30 minutes. And when she came back, she looked like she wanted to scream. She walked past me, slow, seething, silent, but her glare could have cut steel. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look up. Just kept typing. At 4:30 p.m., HR called her again. This time, she didn't come back to her desk. Not until 5 p.m., when most people were packing up, prepping to head home. That's when Jill stormed back into the office like a hurricane. No words. No dignity. She grabbed a box. Began throwing things in. Keyboard. Water bottle. Pictures. Still glaring. Still fuming. She turned to no one in particular and barked. "I hope you're happy. SHE got me fired." Then she shoved her way into the lift and disappeared. A moment later, my inbox chimed. Subject: Resolution of Workplace Conduct Case. After thorough investigation, including statements from multiple employees and review of relevant evidence, this matter is now resolved. You are no longer under review. No further action will be taken. And just like that, it was over. I leaned back. Exhaled. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt free. Voiceover, music fades in slow and powerful. Jill thought mocking my chest made her clever. She thought laughing at my trauma made her untouchable. She thought HR was her playground. She was wrong. It took 16 letters, a photocopied contract, and the courage to speak, just once, in front of the right people. But sometimes, that's all it takes. Epilogue, for anyone listening right now. To anyone who's ever been mocked, judged, or humiliated for something they didn't choose. You do not owe the world an explanation for how you heal. You do not owe your trauma to bullies just so they'll treat you like a person. You owe it to yourself to stand your ground, even if your hands shake while doing it. I survived cancer. Jill couldn't survive the truth.